Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hope you're doing well. We're continuing our reading of St. Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologica. We are in the third article of question 4, dealing with goodness in general, God and the divine attributes. And the third article is whether any creature can be like God. As a Muslim, we would say nothing in creation is comparable to him. But let us see what the Catholic theologians say. We proceed thus to the third article. Objection 1. It seems that no creature can be like God. For it is written in Psalms LXXXV8, "There is none among the gods like unto thee, O Lord." But of all creatures, the most excellent are those which are called by participation gods. Therefore, still less can other creatures be said to be like God. Objection 2. Further, likeness implies comparison, but there can be no comparison between things in a different genus. Now this is interesting. So, likeness does hint at comparison, doesn't it? So when he says here, the person who Aquinas is framing the people's opposition to his, right? But there can be no comparison between things in a different genus. So, as he mentioned earlier, God is his own category. So, you can't compare two different genuses. It would be absurd, even on an earthly example, but also as a spiritual one as well. So that's a very good reply. Therefore, neither can there be any likeness. Thus, we do not say that sweetness is the like whiteness. But no creature is in the same genus as God, since God is no genus, as shown above. Question 3, Article 5. Okay, let's underline that, because that's a good one for us to jump back and reference. This is volume 1, by the way. Therefore, no creature is like God. So not only that, but he says essentially, you can't compare two different genuses, but also contends that God is not even in those genuses. Very apt. Okay. Objection 3. Further, we speak of those things as like which agree in form, but nothing can agree with God in form, for save in God alone essence and existence differ. Okay, so essence and existence differ. Therefore, no creature can be like God. So here we see, nothing can be compared to God's form. And God's essence and existence is different than anything. Therefore, one cannot compare something to God. Objection 4. Further, among the like things, there is mutual likeness. For like is like to like. If therefore any creature is like God, God will be like some creature, which is against what is said by Isaiah, "To whom have you likened God?" XL.18. So here we see how he incorporates textual verses of the Bible to back up what he's saying. Okay? So, like is like to like. So nothing can really be like God, because you would be then saying that that creature is like God, which would be absurd. This is the difference as well between people who have some forms of nature worship, where they have really mixed in these strange earth spirits and kindred spirits and all those kind of weird things that they have done to make people think that a human being can channel some type of energy of God in them, in terms of wolfkin, dragonkin, and really strange Mother Gaia earth worship. You know, you can go all down those paths. But there are lots of people who think they can channel goddess energy, stuff for that, and that this will make them like a goddess on earth. It's very quite strange. I won't distract you with some of those weird pagan beliefs, but it is quite ridiculous. On the contrary, it is written, "Let us make man to our image and likeness." Genesis 1:26. And when he shall appear, we shall be like to him. 1 John I.2. So here, that is an interesting contrary point for the Christians to say to make man in our image. This caused a lot of strange iconography, engraven images, where people would then put God in a reduced form, such as something as lowly as a human. Human is something fantastical on earth, but not so special when you think of it in sort of the cosmic way. I don't know. For me, what is a human compared to an angel? But each creation has its uniqueness, from the octopus to the blue whale to the king cobra. But when people have talked about likeness, they have talked about intelligence and the capacity to exit out of just primal desires and to have a higher form of consciousness. Although our brains are limited by our nervous system and the body that we encapsulate, our sort of flesh prisons, whereas God is above all that and isn't limited by anything, especially for us Muslims. So that's why you'll see even the Christians arguing about, well, if Jesus is God, Trinitarians, how can God bleed? How can humans nail God to a cross? Why would God allow his own creation to humiliate him so and make him cry and bleed? Others have argued that no, Jesus is not God. We as Muslims would argue that Jesus was just a human and that he is not God. So, he was a prophet, peace be upon him, but he was not God. And that is something that I believe. Okay, he goes, I answer that, since likeness is based upon agreement or communication in form. So what does he say here? Likeness is based upon agreement or communication in form. It varies according to the many modes of communication in form. Some things are said to be like which communicate in the same form according to the same formality and according to the same mode. And these are said to be not mere like, but equal in their likeness. As two things equally white are said to be alike, is whiteness. And this is the most perfect likeness. In another way, we speak of things as alike, which communicate in form according to the same formality. So here we see another one here. Things alike which communicate in form. So like, which communicate in form according to the same formality. Right? This one is really deep when you go and think about it. Sorry, my book holder is metal and it keeps clinking every time I press on it. Though not according to the same measure, but according to the more or less, as something less white is said to be like another thing more white. I see what you see. That's a very clever way of looking at it. Different shades of white. They're all similar in the way they communicate their color via the form of its expression, of its degree of whiteness, but you can only compare them in that way. But this would hint at where the intelligence argue comes in, is God's ability to think and be all wise. Humans have a tiny degree of that. So if something's barely white compared to the perfect form of white, it would still be on that spectrum. It almost sounds like they're talking about a spectrum. So the formality of the spectrum could be intelligence, which is usually where you get the likeness argument, even though he's using color as the example. And this is imperfect likeness. So here we see a perfect phrase, imperfect likeness. So can you compare, according to the Christians, can you compare imperfect likenesses? This would be a very interesting thing to examine, because as a Muslim we would say no, nothing is comparable to him. High above is he, exalted above his throne, as befits his majesty. No, you can't do it. But we're dealing with Catholics. And a third way, it's important to put like dots next to each one of his points, okay? In a third way, some things are said to be alike which communicate in the same form. So we have, remember here, some things are said to be like which communicate in the same form according to their same formality. So we have formality, and then we had according to the same formality, though not according to the same measure. Now we have communicating in the same form, but not according to the same formality. It's very organized. As we see in univocal agents, for some, since every agent reproduces itself so far as it is an agent. So let's repeat that. Every agent reproduces itself so far as it is an agent, and everything acts according to the manner of its form. The effect must be in some way resemble the form of the agent. So here, the agent produces itself as far as it can to its form. If, therefore, the agent is contained in the same species as its effect, there will be a likeness in form between that which makes and that which is made, according to the same formality of the species as man reproduces man. Formality of the species. Now, this hints at what the objectioner was talking about, the genus as God. And if you are comparing different genuses, that is not what you're supposed to do. And God is not a genus according to him. So if you're going to take the formality of comparing the different species, that would be a roadblock for you, because God is not that way. If, however, the agent and its effects are not contained in the same species, there will be a likeness, but not according to the formality of the same species, as things generated by the sun's heat may be in some sort of spoken as like the sun, not as though they receive the form of the sun in a specific likeness, but in a generic likeness. Kind of like fire, I guess you could say. The heat, you would say the likeness of the heat. How bright it is. Its function. Therefore, if there is an agent not contained in any genus, its effects will still more distantly reproduce the form of the agent, not that is, so as to participate in the likeness of the agent's form, according to the same specific or generic formality, but only according to some sort of analogy, as existence is common to all. In this way, all created things, so far as they are beings, are like God as the first and universal principle of all being. That's a strange way to put it. So, all created things, they are beings, and they are similar to God as the first and universal principle of being. So, They all contain beingness. God contains beingness. Maybe that's what he's hinting at. But the degree, sort of like how he mentioned the imperfect likeness, shades of white, shades of intelligence, shades of likeness. Reply objection 2? No, actually, reply objection 1. As Dionysius says, Divin Nom Ix, when Holy Writ declares that nothing is like God, it does not mean to deny all likeness to him. Ooh, okay. Let's put a little annotation there, likeness. For the same things can be liked and unliked to God, like according as they imitate him. Imitate. So we have imitate, let's write that down. Imitate. As far as he, who is not perfectly imitable, can be imitated, unlike according as they fall short of their cause. Not merely in intensity and remission, as which is less white falls short of that which is more white. Aha, yes, see, so the less white imitates the more white. So they're imitating the shades of whiteness. But because they are not in agreement, so they're not in agreement because they're not the same shade, or what constitutes true imitation. But because they are not in agreement specifically or generically. So they are not in agreement specifically or generically. Reply objection 2. God is not related to creatures as though belonging to a different genus, but as transcending every genus, and as the principle of all genera. So, still, with imitation, humans, now, this would be very complicated, I think, for us Muslims, because Allah has 99 names. So, and all the best names are for him. So if Allah is the most merciful, we can imitate mercy, but our level of mercy, even though it be imperfect, like the less shade of white is that he was using, it wouldn't be the same as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy, not saying that he's saying it would be automatically the same. Obviously, he did say that it would be imperfect, but he can forgive for many things and not hold a grudge, I assume, from what I've learned thus far in Islam. You know, how many times humans sin a day and how many times you ask for forgiveness. He's the most merciful. We humans kind of have conditional mercy, bear a grudge. We may forgive, but we don't forget. And our not forgetting can cause problems. So, we wouldn't then say we are imitating Allah's mercy in that way and then likening to him that imitation. But we would look at the attributes, I'd argue, and then try to implement them in our own lives without comparing ourselves necessarily to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because nothing is comparable to him. So that'd be a fascinating topic to get at and to hear discussed, different than how the Catholics view it. Okay. These have different colors in this pen, so because of how dense the text is, it's good to annotate the different points in different colors, because then you separate the text. It's a hint for you. Likeness of creatures to God is not affirmed on account of agreement in form, according to the formality of the same genus or species, but solely according to an analogy, inasmuch as God is essential being, whereas other things are beings by participation. Ooh, look at that. God is essential being, whereas other things are beings by participation. So do you remember what you said earlier? So you have the likeness of us because we are beings, and God is the first universal principle of all being, as he stated. And we see here a further explanation that we merely participate in being, which is our likeness, whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to them they might say Jehovah, is the essential being. So you have the spectrum here, participating in being, and then you have the highest form, which is the essential being, because without it nothing can happen, right? So he's really compacted his points here, if you follow along. And so the likeness, being part of the spectrum, being part of the beingness, and participation, showing that we are not as high, right? Whereas the essential would always be the highest, because without it, everything crumbles. So, you gotta still be careful though. I'd argue. You gotta still be careful though with those types of comparisons. Okay, reply objection 4, final objection. Although it may be admitted that creatures are in some sort like God, it must... so this is another differentiation between us. May be admitted that creatures are in some sort like God, it must no wise be admitted that God is like creatures. Now, that's the interesting part. So some creatures are like God, but God is not like those creatures. It's a very tense paradox. So really we come at the beingness of the existence and the expression of them. Really wouldn't be where you would reduce God down, but rather, because then you'd be comparing, rather you would show the consciousness within the beingness within those creatures. Maybe if we use the principle of charity, he's showing like a sign, like they have intelligence, so they must have been created. It cannot just be chance that they exist like that. Because as Dionysius says, div nom ix, a mutual likeness may be found between things of the same order, but not between a cause and that which is caused. Okay, so that's unique. Mutual likeness between things of the same order, but not between cause and effect. So remember, if God is the cause of our existence, and we're the effect of his cause, because we exist in our beingness, and he is the essential being, whereas we merely participate in it, the effect comes through the participation. And this is a very unique way to talk about mutual likeness. However, as Muslims, you have to dance that line very carefully. We don't want to commit shirk, and we want to stick upon the path of Tawheed. For we say that a statue is like man, but not conversely. Hold on. A statue is like man, but is the man like the statue? Imitation. So the statue imitates man, but does man imitate the statue? You see what he's doing here? Conversely, right? So also a creature can be spoken of as in some sort like God, but not that God is like a creature. Fascinating. That one is gonna run you into some mental tough points, isn't it? Fascinating. So whether any creature can be like God. Very unique in the way he presented it. Very unique. But we have to be careful. We have to be very careful with what we assign to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is highly reckless if we don't think before speaking. And so this would be from the Catholic view, and for them it makes sense from their text, but from ours it would be quite different. We would really dance the line quite cautiously, I'd argue. Let me know what you think. By the way, if you'd like to join my blog, it's www.subscribestar.com/Milahan. Hope to see you there.